If you were growing up and in high school around the end of the 2010s, chances are you watched or were at least introduced to Euphoria. HBO's new, edgy teen drama show quickly became one of the most popular things on the channel, boosting its creator, Sam Levinson, into everyone's young directors to watch lists. Without a doubt, one of the most well-done aspects about the show is the flashy and smooth way the show is shot, compiled onto its use of colorful lighting. The show is visually very well done, as are the majority of Levinson's work when it comes to what's in front of the camera. Euphoria was also lauded for having some of television's strongest performances, with Zendaya, Sydney Sweeney, Jacob Elordi, Hunter Schafer, among other members of the cast, being celebrated for their roles. If you look at The Idol as well, I think that the majority of the performances are very well done, and it speaks loudly about Levinson's capabilities as a director. Anyway, when Euphoria ended, it was overall loved by the majority. There were obviously some controversies, like with any Levinson production, but after the first season's run, the second season was something people were really excited for. In 2019, Sam Levinson seemed to be at the beginning of a very promising career. So how did we get to where we are now, where his newest project, a TV show on HBO called The Idol, seems to be one of the most hated things on television? Now, I'm generally of the opinion that Euphoria Season 1 is the greatest thing Levinson has created, and it's not even close. To analyze how Levinson's writing changed from project to project, I think it's important to start with how Euphoria was developed. Based off an Israeli series of the same name, HBO had begun looking for a showrunner to lead the American remake, which eventually led to them sitting down with Sam Levinson, who had been working on a script about his own experiences with drug abuse since 2006. Obviously, the meeting went pretty well, and soon Levinson was announced to be the showrunner. Now, it's clear that Levinson likes to work alone from the lack of writer's room present on Euphoria, but he was open to collaborating with the actors, and I think this willingness to adapt was a part of the reason Euphoria ended up resonating with as many people as it did. For Euphoria's pre-production, Sam Levinson had an extensive collaboration with the actors, having HBO bring them down to meet him for a weekend just to talk about the characters for a few hours. Hunter Schafer has said, "It was very important to me that he was collaborative and he was amazing." And he has been amazing. Everything I could wish for as far as listening to my story and my experiences and letting that influence the script and talking to me about it and wrestling together with ideas. The big thing that really hooked everyone on Euphoria was the authenticity of the characters, their emotions, and their experiences. Rue is clearly the Levinson self-insert, and it's clear that the writer is putting a lot of work into portraying these experiences as raw as possible. But if it weren't for the collaboration, it would have fallen flat for the other characters too. Euphoria clearly benefited from having its writing and storyline be inspired by real experiences, and that emotional vulnerability is what drew people to the show in the first place. A year after the end of the first season, Levinson would collaborate again with Zendaya and Hunter Schafer, who helped write and direct the 2 Euphoria specials, each of them focusing on their respective characters. These episodes contain some of the least flashy camera work and have the least amount of action in them, and yet managed to be some of the highest rated episodes of the entire show, because of how much depth was given to each character in their hour-long monologues. And so ended the first season of Euphoria, a season of television that is generally still beloved and definitely the best thing Sam Levinson has made. There were some criticisms, definitely, most of them focusing on Levinson's use of sexualizing high schoolers and gratuitous nudity, but we'll get more into that later. The wait between Season 1 and Season 2 was long, so before I get into that, I want to talk about the 2 feature films Sam Levinson has directed, Assassination and Malcolm and Marie, both of which I think emphasize different aspects of Sam Levinson's directing and writing style that has since become more prominent. Assassination follows a group of 4 girls in a town where everybody gets hacked and has all their personal information leaked. Soon, a group of people in the town form that blames one of the girls, and everyone tries to hunt her down and kill her. Now, the movie is, again, impressive and well shot. I think for a directorial debut, the camera work and directing are very well done. That being said, the script was a different thing entirely. I think where Euphoria has the edge is that we follow around 8 very developed characters in a medium that allows these 8 characters to be developed. In Assassination, the characters are very thin and exist either to be an aggressor or a victim. There isn't characterization given to the characters, nor reason in giving to the abuse other than the vague concept that something is really fucked up in our society, which is an over-discussed topic already, but even more so when nothing new is being commentated on. Assassination Nation opens and starts its trailer with a series of trigger warnings, but I don't see how marketing yourself in this way, with all the edgy things that can happen in your movie but not commentating on it at all, contributes to a person's experience of the film, other than hype it up and build this aura around it that it's so edgy. One of the biggest themes in this movie is toxic masculinity, and there are many very toxic males in this film, I admit that, but the film doesn't really say anything about it. It doesn't examine why they're like this, how it can be stopped, or how it affects other people other than in the moment they're being physically confronted. I may be in the minority because there seems to be quite a few people who enjoy this movie, but I can't find any positives about its story. Moving on to Levinson's second feature film, Malcolm and Marie, Levinson changes up his style for a more calmer movie. Still very aesthetic and well done, Malcolm and Marie is a much slower movie that forgoes the violence, edgy material, and multiple character projects that Levinson was used to before. Instead of his floating camera, here the camera remains more steady and the movements more noticeable than his previous work. Malcolm and Marie still came with criticism though, as the character of Malcolm was clearly a way for Sam Levinson to vent about his frustration over criticisms of his last two projects. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that the Marie character does introduce a more nuanced discussion about the entertainment industry, but overall, the points the movie raises seem to be a lot more shallow than realized. It's clear that the movie was written by Levinson himself, as in the script, Malcolm, a black filmmaker, complains about aspects of being a person of color working in the entertainment industry. While it may have made sense for a character more like Levinson to be having this conversation, it makes no sense for a black filmmaker who's been working, like Malcolm has, to just now be discovering these issues. Ultimately, both of these movies tackle its themes using mostly its high production and camera work, while lacking the authenticity that the collaboration of Euphoria Season 1 brought to the project. So hopefully things began to look up once Euphoria Season 2 premiered, right? Well, not really. Euphoria Season 2 ended up not living up to the expectations of a lot of fans. Beloved characters from the first season were written to fall into situations inconsistent with their characters or written out of the show entirely. Relatability began to change as crazier and edgier things were added into the show, and of course the biggest criticism, and the one that Sam has had since the beginning of his career, his overuse of nudity and victimization of certain characters. Now, I want to be clear, for the most part, everybody who has worked on the show has said that it is a mostly good environment, and whenever something is uncomfortable, they talk to Sam and something changes. That being said, I think it's still fair to be concerned how much of the show was changed because people kept getting uncomfortable with either the situation or a character's storyline, two of them including relationships between adults and a high school student. In a few weeks, one of the most relatable TV shows had been turned into a contest to see how every episode could get worse. With an uptick in the amount of traumatic events and sexual situations as characters found themselves in, and a downtick in the amount of effort that had been put into making these characters seem real, Euphoria quickly fell out of the public's favor. But Sam had long faced criticism of using real-life trauma as a way of making his work edgy, and it continued to get worse with his newest show, The Idol. Premiering its first two episodes at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival, any hype around the show was quickly squashed after its negative reviews. Most critics agreed that the show showed potential, but quickly fell back into Levinson's habit of trying to be transgressive and erotic. Now, remember when earlier I mentioned that Euphoria was so good because it was so clearly a collaborative work between many people's experiences? Yeah, this one seemed to try as hard as possible to not be that. Originally, American filmmaker Amy Seimetz was signed on to be the director of the show, and although she wouldn't have been part of the core writing process, it's clear from the final product that her contribution to the show would have been invaluable. With her help, 80% of the show had been filmed before a dispute between Amy and Sam ended with her leaving the project, and the entire thing having to be filmed again. Along with The Weeknd, who also stars in the show, Sam took the show to a completely new direction, worried that the show focused too much on the female perspective. And oh boy.
Really?
Yes!
What's wrong with him?
He's so rapey.
Yeah, I kind of like that about him.
Joss.
This turned out to be one of the weirdest shows in a while, for lots of reasons. The Idol follows famous pop singer Jocelyn as she struggles with making music for her next album due to the death of her abusive mother and some mental health issues. The show also focuses on members of our artistic and managing crews and how none of them really care about her, more so the money she makes. On top of these two elements, the show also focuses on this character of Tedros, played by The Weeknd, a cult leader who begins a relationship with Jocelyn, abuses her, and tries to involve himself in her career. On the surface level, these three things could come together to make an interesting story, but this show suffers from a lot of things present in his earlier projects as well. First off, the show's pacing feels very strange and it makes it feel very difficult to actually get invested in these characters. From episode to episode, there were big leaps in time, and it made it really hard to understand what happened in between them, and it felt like we were missing parts of the story we should have been seeing. For example, the jump between episode 2 and 3, we go from Tedros and Jocelyn just starting a relationship to the next episode where they are now living together and Tedros' cult has moved in as well. I think it would have been really interesting to see how Tedros got so entwined with Jocelyn's career so quickly, seeing that one of the show's biggest themes is how musicians in the industry are being exploited. It could have been effective to show the process instead of just skipping ahead of it. I think the confusing episode to episode time jumps also don't help the fact that the show doesn't really seem to be about anything. It deals a lot with the industry and shows how fucked up it is, but doesn't really say anything new, and the situation with Tedros has become so creepy and out of the ordinary that it also doesn't seem like it's trying to portray those issues in a meaningful way. Also, when talking about abusive relationships, it's clear that Tedros is an abusive and controlling partner for the first half of the show, but then in the last episode we find out that actually Jocelyn has been manipulating everything the whole time. The now infamous hairbrush scene where Tedros beats Jocelyn with a hairbrush her mother abused her with is revealed to have been something that Jocelyn wanted done to her, because the hairbrush and the abuse was a completely made up story. But this also kind of implies that Xander was in on all of it too, because he confirmed this to Tedros in the last episode. But I just failed to see why Jocelyn would have a reason to tell her creative director to tell a lie to some random guy she met in a club. Eventually I just realized I was giving the show too much credit and decided I don't actually care. But if the twist of the show is that the victim of abuse we were following was actually just manipulating everything to happen how she wanted it to happen, then what was the point of the show? It feels like the show was meant to be enjoyed as a drama on the surface level after this reveal, but it also fails to do this because the ending of the show just feels so flat. There's also a significant part of the last episode that explores Tedros' cult members now performing for her and being friends with Jocelyn, but nothing leads up to this moment. Isaac has had one interaction with Jocelyn, Susanna's son has had two, and I didn't even know the third one's name until this episode. Nothing really leads to anything in this show, it's just scene after scene. It also doesn't help that this show about exploitation kind of feels like it itself exploits the use of nudity. Euphoria had a lot, but I feel like because of the characters' ages, it was restrained. In this show, there's at least one extended sex scene every episode, and not many of them feel necessary. Jocelyn will have conversations with another fully dressed character while she's fully nude, and even when a sex scene is essential to the story, the camera feels like it goes above and beyond to show what's happening. There's also a character in Tedros' sex cult that is very clearly a minor and made to talk and act like a minor, that also has some pretty unnecessary scenes, which isn't helped at all by the fact that the actress playing her also played an underage girl being taken advantage of by a creepy older man in Sean Baker's Red Rocket. But whereas that movie uses the character as a core part of showing how shitty the main character is, this one kind of just uses her as a way of setting an uncomfortable tone. It feels very much like someone using something risque or controversial even to give the show its edge, but without any purpose, and it reflects in the writing as well. Every once in a while there'll be a weird line thrown in that, again, just feels like someone trying to get a reaction, and I'm specifically reminded of a joke made about a child on Epstein's Island. but this all goes back into the show just not really knowing what it is. Not only is the pacing and the message all over the place, but so is the tone of the show. I think the central idea, the exploitation of entertainers in the industry, could have been tackled more effectively if it had stayed more prominent instead of all the domestic violence and suffering to get great art themes hadn't been added in as well. And it's not because those topics shouldn't be talked about. They definitely should. But in a show that actually has the time and intent to unpack those themes, not just as an afterthought. And while The Idol tries to juggle all these different themes, it deals with them in wildly different ways and tones, making for a show that feels very inconsistent from scene to scene. For example, two of the most prominent members on Jocelyn's team, Chaim and Destiny, and their stories are mostly treated with a sense of humor that isn't present in most of the show. And while some films can balance some really dark things with comedy, this one just ends up feeling a lot like a project that couldn't commit to one thing. And last but not least, I have to talk about The Weeknd. Most of the actors that have worked with Sam Levinson have been amazing, including most of the actors in The Idol. Bad acting is not usually a complaint that gets thrown at him a lot, which is why it's kind of surprising to see The Weeknd's performance in this. I don't want to hate on him too much, I know that it's a hard job, but I think a lot of the show relied on his performance making Tedros seem a lot more menacing or mysterious, and that just wasn't a weight that he could carry. I could see a version of this character that is interesting, but I think most people are really confused as to why Jocelyn even likes this guy so much. He's also supposed to, at least in part, seem like he's really informed about the music and the industry, and in turn is a bit cocky, but The Weeknd kind of plays him as an arrogant idiot who doesn't really know what he's doing and just bullies everyone into thinking he knows what he's doing. He kind of just seems like a dick to everyone, and even then, he can't really be scary enough to sell the performance.
Let me catch you looking at her again. Let me catch you looking at her again.
I'm not.
Let me catch you looking at her again.
I'm sorry,
Let
I'm
me
not
fucking
sure.
catch you looking at her again. I'll fucking drag you down Rodeo by your fucking ass. Just fucking stomp you. I'll fucking curb stomp you.
I'm sorry.
I'll fucking curb stomp you.
I'm sorry, I don't.
There was a lot that went wrong in the making of The Idol, but Tedros, especially being played by The Weeknd, who was partly a creator on the show and one of the reasons one of the original creators had to leave, was the final blow. I did have quite a few laughs throughout the show, but honestly, it ended up feeling just very underwhelming in the end, which is the first time I have to say that about a Levinson project. If you want to laugh a bit but don't want to watch the show, I recommend this video by Uncarly. It goes more in depth on the plot than I did. As for what's next for Sam Levinson, probably Euphoria Season 3, but who knows, maybe we'll get another movie. I really do like how he shoots his work, and I think the topics in his work are important ones that should be discussed, but hopefully for his next project he goes back to collaborating like with the cast of Euphoria Season 1. That's pretty much all I have to say, so for now, peace, and have a good day.